So again, I think our process, like I said, it really does work the vast majority of the time. I think, this again, I think the complication of multiple development approvals that occurred over time made it somewhat difficult to sort of anticipate what the ultimate build out was going to look like. We don't have a perfect map. But we do a very good job, I think, generally of ensuring that as we're reviewing each development application, that we're trying to ensure that we meet both those spacing requirements for streets and pedestrian connections. And there's also a block perimeter standard, so we're trying to ensure that we don't create big super blocks where a pedestrian can't pass through there. And like I said, clearly here we would have, in hindsight, done something different, and certainly it's a good lesson learned. And as I shared with you, Chair, this is just another good reminder for us to point out to the staff. Obviously, this is something that happened now 6-7 years ago, but we definitely want to take advantage of the opportunity just to remind folks that this was an opportunity here that we won't have the chance to really go back and address. So we want to try to make sure that we get it right the first time.
Just a couple of follow-up comments. Yeah, I think dedicated with clear county ownership and responsibility for maintenance, I think is important too. In the past, we set up easements, but with no clear lines of responsibility about who's supposed to maintain over time. And sometimes in earlier years, we used to create very narrow easements, right, and they would feel very unsafe. Trees would crowd over them. They get to be very dark and kind of scary, twisty, funky little easements connecting cul-de-sacs, and the nearby property owners felt that they weren't safe. It wasn't clear who was supposed to be responsible for maintaining and sweeping pine needles and leaves and things like that. And so all those things, hopefully, going forward in recent times, we're avoiding. And it's important that we have a clear understanding of whose responsibility. And by taking full ownership, fee simple, absolute, whatever, is much better than just simply the bare easement possessory interest.
So we do not take ownership of these. They're typically set aside as a tract that's owned by a homeowners association in most cases that has the ownership and ongoing maintenance responsibility. That's been very helpful, as you said, in terms of ensuring that there's adequate maintenance performed on these. But we, in the past, have we've just not been staffed and had the maintenance capabilities to address all of these. So we continue to rely on private owners to do that, but it's typically an ownership association as opposed to an individual, and we've had much better success with that model.
I think the county should take a look at the possibility of actually taking on ownership and responsibility for some of these. And there's new tools and equipment that can allow sweeping and things like that didn't used to exist.
And may need to qualify for URMD funding.
Yes.
I just wanted to add briefly, both Mr. Roberts and I looked at the situation and in retrospect kind of scratched our head and wondered why it wasn't required. But I do want to note that the actual decision was a type 3 decision before a hearings officer who had to weigh all the standards and information at the time. And I can't guess the specifics. I did go back and look at the staff report for the particular case, but there was probably more in there than in testimony than I saw in the staff report on how this ended up this way, but it ultimately was a hearings officer's determination not to require it.
Yeah, I'd like to see that there be a review of situations like this. It's not the first time that a hearings officer made a decision to not include bike and pedestrian connectivity in a development application, because after all, the hearings officer makes decisions on what is the code, what does the law allow, as opposed to what is best for the community over the course of time. So I think that tells us that in urban unincorporated Washington County, we need to do a better job with clarifying our code and why it's there for community development. I do appreciate that since you mentioned Mr. Roberts, that effort's been made through the 2017 process and forward to make sure that there are better community results. What I've had the opportunity to learn in this particular case through the mail thread that we had going on from the constituent communication, and as you highlighted here, this particular instance of the multiple developments happened earlier than 2017, 7 years ago. This just underscores why, how important it is that you and your organization have worked on these processes so that we can achieve a better community result. So I do appreciate that that work is in place now. Thank you for highlighting it. And onward ho we go together, building a better community for all.
Indeed. Thank you.
Also for today's agenda, we have an added item on the consent agenda. Under support services, there is an item G, accept bid and award a contract for Adams Crossing first floor tenant improvement. We moved on to questions on the formal agenda.
I have one question.
Go ahead, Commissioner.
I am having trouble finding the board agenda online. When I click on it, it shows the work session agenda for both the work session and the board. If I'm making an error, would somebody just send me an email and let me know, or send me the link?
I don't know, it worked yesterday. I think Kathy Jacoby has something to share.
Yes, we'll communicate that with upstairs administration and get you all set, okay?
Yes, thank you.
I also neglected to highlight that we have an added agenda item 2.5, COVID-19 update that we'll do on camera. And then under proclamations, I thought there are two proclamations. I thought for the first one, the Fair Housing Month in Washington County, we'd have a recorder read that proclamation into the record. And the second one, Commissioner Treese, as you are our representative to the Community Development, the Policy Advisory Committee, the PAB or board, the second proclamation deals with the work for the Community Development Week. Would you be willing to read that?
Absolutely, and thank you.
Okie dokie. Any other questions on today's formal agenda for tonight's meeting? And I understand we'll be using YouTube. Okay. Well, without further ado, sorry, through all that discussion, we're a little bit behind, so we'll move on to our next agenda topic, legislative update. So if our government relations team would come up, and we'll turn the mics over to you.
Good morning. For the record, for anyone that's listening in, Paige Spence here for Government Relations, joined by Aaron Doyle. Glad to see and hear everyone healthy today. Your Government Relations team is here specifically to provide updates on COVID-19. We recognize that under normal circumstances, we would have already given you a more comprehensive session wrap from the 2020 short session. We will be providing that to you in the coming days. Our focus over the past couple weeks has been on COVID-19 and the county's urgent needs. As you are all well aware, Washington County's first case was diagnosed on February 28th, and those of us who went to the NACO conference returned on March 3rd. Since our return from DC, we have really been focused on the county's needs in light of this public health crisis. Principally, we've been in close contact with the department heads in our respective portfolios, as well as with Steve Rhodes and County Council, to assure that county needs, most urgent and into the future, are being met. Things are moving very quickly. You may have questions today that we cannot answer. There is a lot of uncertainty, which makes us all uncomfortable, me included. But any answers that we cannot provide today, we will seek to answer for you as soon as we can. We are in constant contact with our partners at the federal lobby firm Van Scoyoc Associates, as well as with our associations and other counties. So you are aware, we will be providing you with a weekly memo regarding COVID-19 and the county's needs. You should have our first memo in front of you today. And also, one or more of us will be speaking with you briefly each work session until a time to be determined. You can always also give us a call or email. We're happy to have one-on-ones with you separately as needed if there are issues that you want to dive more deeply into. But today we're going to just give you a few high-level updates. But again, I want to stress that we are available anytime to talk with you individually. So at the federal level, Congress has passed 3 bills that have been signed into law. The first provided assistance, as you all know, to the healthcare response to the crisis. The second bill was the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, which focused on aid for families and workers affected by the crisis and expanded testing. And then the third bill, which Chair Harrington referenced earlier today, was the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, otherwise known as the CARES Act, which provided a package of over $2 trillion in stimulus dollars to help combat the health crisis and send economic relief to workers and businesses affected by restrictions that are intended to stop the outbreak's spread. We will continue to work with our federal lobby team at Van Scoyoc Associates to assure that the county's needs are met and that we can take advantage of opportunities to gather our needed resources. And on the federal side of our work will be included in our weekly updates to you. At the state level, as your lobbyists, we wish we had all of the answers, but process-wise is still a bit unclear. We are expecting a first of potentially multiple special sessions to be called any day now. There are multiple bill drafts that are circulating, but there are still some negotiations and some drafting to happen. So as soon as we have a specific date and package of what we expect, we will be alerting you. So for now, I want to, each of us want to talk with you about a couple of specific issues within our portfolios that we are tracking closely. So for me, I'm focusing a lot on homelessness and housing. For homelessness, County Council has raised an issue around periodic tenancy. So this would be a situation if there is an individual who is staying in a hotel or motel with a voucher or is staying in a shelter in a single bed for a long period of time. That could end up constituting a tenancy under landlord-tenant law, which is not going to be the most helpful as we move forward. So we'll be looking into that issue. And then you may recall that in the short session, there was House Bill 4001, which was part of Speaker Kotek's homelessness package. And the legislature contemplated in that bill a component to supersede local zoning to allow for development of shelters in most lands. And during session, your GR team worked through a group of stakeholders to place some sideboards on that siting and compliance with other rules regarding health and safety requirements. And that shelter siting flexibility reflecting House Bill 4001 negotiations is included in drafted legislation for consideration in the emergency session. And as drafted, these provisions would have sunset of July 1, 2021. And then the additional focus for homelessness right now is shelter capacity, both for those who are healthy and those who have either been diagnosed with the COVID-19 virus or are showing symptoms. With respect to housing, very grateful for the chair's leadership with the other 2 Tri-County Metro chairs who sent a letter to the governor urging a moratorium on evictions, and that the governor now has put that through an executive order. So the next steps are looking at rent assistance, mortgage payment assistance, and commercial evictions, including county properties. As you all know, Washington County Housing Authority does actually own properties, so our ability to pay our mortgages and other expenses will be impacted as well if folks are not able to pay rents. There are also a couple of regulatory fixes to the Community Development Block Grant Program that I'm focusing on, and we'll be sending a letter to our federal delegation around. And then with HHS, we're looking at the need for protective personal equipment, or PPE, and ensuring that Oregon is going to be getting our allotment to keep our communities safe. And then also looking at the services that our county already provides to our most vulnerable, such as transportation and meal services for the elderly and disabled, and then also disability services. So just making sure that there are alternative mechanisms of providing these services and adequate funding to do so. And then I would be remiss if I didn't give a huge shout out to Marnie and her team and everyone who's working at the Emergency Operations Center. We're in very close communications, and I know that things are changing rapidly, but they're doing a fantastic job. Thank you. I'll turn it over to Erin.
Good morning. For those who can't see me, Erin Doyle. I am going to cover both Jajit's portfolio and my own, given that Jajit has been out on personal leave. I know that he is back and paying attention. He is watching or listening via the YouTube if it's working right now. We've been working with... We've been working with the County Council's office as well to kind of compile the list of needs of the regulatory structures that the state has placed on counties in performing our normal duties as a governmental agency, and trying to work those some solutions into the legislative concepts. We have been successful on some, but unfortunately not all, but we think we've found local workarounds for those things that we couldn't. The memo that was referenced by Paige was sent out to you via email this morning, so I won't go into all of the details, but I wanted to kind of hit a couple of highlights related to the public meetings issues. As everyone is adopting new technology, we're making sure that we're abiding by the public meetings laws that are in place and the ability to provide that type of constituent engagement. So right now, a lot of the focus has been on making sure we're not running afoul of public meetings law if only written communication is provided, but we are also engaging in how we can work using technology and telephonic and any other, if we use a Zoom platform or Teams platform, to not be platform biased, figuring out how we can coordinate all of that so that public meetings can still run as smoothly as they normally do, but the constituents can participate as we work through a new reality for the next few months. Also very importantly and top of mind, also based on Chair Harrington's comments about the budget and the ramifications of this cost that we're undertaking and the 2020 session's failings, we are looking at how to make that budget process flexible. There is currently language in legislation that has been drafted for the emergency session related to COVID that would allow for a much more flexible budgetary process as far as how we interact with the public on that, but also the ability to spend money and set your budget as your availability dictates. So flexible deadline there is it's code for that, just to make sure that the process can be followed, but that you don't lose the ability to spend money as you're trying to react to everything we're trying to react to and maintain the county into the next fiscal year. So those are the two big highlights there. One other thing to be aware of is transient lodging taxes. They are creating a flexibility within the legislation to allow us to use that specifically for COVID response. And I don't have the language in my head yet, but I'm going to look at that to see how long that authority would last. But basically, it's taking us out of those required percentages that have to be spent on tourism purposes so that we can respond to COVID. I would imagine that the partnership that we have to have with the Travel Association would want to look at preserving those businesses that normally gain from the tourism that have been very hard hit in this economic crisis. So those are the big things from Jajit's portfolio that I wanted to provide you information on. From my portfolio, there is a ton of economic development protection going on in a lot of different instances. Not every business will be covered by every program that's been put in place at the federal or state level. And we are working to make sure with our local government partners, with ourselves, with our EOC response team, that we are providing as much information as we can, but making sure that our resources can help those that can't receive the help from other programs that exist. So just kind of wrapping my head around what the feds have provided and the processes and the delays that are coming with that. There was some information about the Small Business Association being a touch overwhelmed right now and not being able to respond quickly to requests, and then being given a different, like 14 different things that they have to oversee. So that's one huge part of it. I think that the state will be reacting. What we also are going to be working on with our federal partners is making sure that these types of emergency responses that we do at the local level will be reimbursable, but you'll hear more about that. I'm totally stealing someone's thunder right now, and that's totally inappropriate. But the other piece of it is making sure that employees have the resources that they need and finding a way to make sure we're supportive of those legislative efforts moving forward so that our community members both stay in their homes. Their businesses not being evicted is another key component. So that way, once we lift the orders to stay home to save lives, we have places to go and businesses to spend our money at. So at this point, I'm happy to take any questions moving forward as this page, and then any questions, as she said, we can't answer now. We will get answers back to you as quickly as we can. But in the spirit of shout-outs, I'd really like to thank Alan and his team for being incredibly responsive, informative, and creative in the problem solving that they have undertaken as we try to abide by state statute and be an open, transparent county government, but recognizing we are in urgent times with a very different set of needs.
I have some questions. One of them I think you've taken care of for me, but I'll just play it back to make sure I got it right. So currently with the Washington County Transient Lodging Tax, there is a percentage agreement in place, and a certain percentage of that already goes into the Washington County General Fund. So we have the full flexibility to use that as we've been using it. But what you were referring to in the memo is the possibility of sequestering and that may be too strong of a word, but looking at the other distribution mechanisms and having those dollars be used instead, for example, with tourism, or maybe with city distributions that they possibly be used for COVID-19. Is that something that the state legislature would determine through their concepts?
Chair Harrington, so the legislative concept as written, I have 17 spreadsheets and 3 documents that I'm trying to work from. So as currently drafted, it's going to be a legislative construct. So it has to come through whatever the legislature says because it's a temporary reprieve from statutory authority. Yep. So the legislature at this point, and this may be still in flux, so if things change, we'll keep you in the know. But that the bill will allow net revenue from a TLT imposed or increased by local government to be used for purposes of supporting businesses affected by the coronavirus disease 2019, also known as COVID-19 pandemic. It does not apply to net revenue pledged as security for the repayment of bonded indebtedness by the local government. So basically, it's that net revenue has become much more flexible for purposes of supporting businesses impacted by requirements of the COVID-19. And then that applies to the use of net revenue that occurs on or after March 8th of 2020. So it's time limited as well. So it's the dollars that we collect on the TLT after the crisis was becoming more robust and tourism was slowing down. So, I mean, it's also a diminishing pot, so we have to keep that in mind. Right. So that might have been more of an answer than you wanted. But
And
no,
Madam,
it was actually very helpful to hear.
we would definitely need legislative fix. We don't have any discretion on how we divvy that money up.
Right,
So, yeah.
right.
So,
Or deviating from the current allocation.
right, and there's been, just for information, there's been a number of requests from hoteliers to waive delivering that money to us, and we've informed them that that's not their money, it's the guests' money that they pay to the hoteliers, and that money is still expected to be paid.
Yep, yep. Okay.
You had more questions?
No, on the budget, I would like to see that we have the budget flexibility, but I'm hopeful through our budget process, and I know we'll talk about this more next Tuesday, April 7th. I don't want to ease up on public transparency and engagement on our budget. So, but I do understand that other jurisdictions in our state are severely impacted. Their public engagement and even getting their budget committee together is severely impacted.
I would like to be clear that those are options that are being provided to the local government to flex things, and I think it's also responsive to the need to maybe not necessarily provide a location in person if that is deemed to be medically unsound advice, but also to be able to perform input opportunities very clearly through written testimony or other means that the county finds that will work. So it's creating that flexibility, not to remove transparency, but to give you the options to respond appropriately.
What I would like to better understand is there are these legislative concepts, but and many of them are enabling concepts, right? What I'm trying to understand, and I couldn't quite discern from this latest memo, is what are ones that we absolutely need as opposed to what ones might be helpful towards us. So that's what I'm having a little trouble grasping. And then the third thing that I just wanted to mention is thank you for being flexible to the whole team, because the joint subcommittee is looking at or has looked at all kinds of different wants and needs, and you've been trying to keep up with information as it's been forming. And we know that, or we are fully expecting that there will be at least a one-day special session for all this COVID response. So just keep at it. You're doing a great job, and no matter what happens, we'll catch up with it, and we know we can count on you for bringing us up to speed once all of that activity happens fast and furiously.
We thank you for your leadership and yours as well, Mr. Rhodes, for allowing us to telecommute and maintain a safe workplace so we can be as productive as possible. Thank you.
Yes, indeed, and maybe our CWS associates can get you some of that special hand sanitizer.
Yeah, I think my only comment would be, I think the COVID-19 situation has pointed out to us the value, the benefits of us really building up our government relations staff, and we really have needed you, and doing what we've done in the last year or so to bring all of you on board has really been a good decision to make.
Commissioner Willie, do you have any questions?
No, not at this time. I think I appreciate the information and certainly the update, because there's a lot of this stuff that goes right on by us or doesn't even come to us. So I appreciate this information, and if I have any questions, I'll certainly reach out.
I just wanted to check for the two commissioners we have on the telephone. Do you have any questions or comments? And I keep pointing to the ceiling.
I like being up there.
Yeah, we are here out there.
Yes.
I do have one really quick point, and that is that I certainly understand for local governments the need to take and look how to address that budgetary issue of meeting in conformance with the local budget law. They're going to have a tough time. Just a thought, though, we also need to be cognizant of our A&T. The reason that all those things were put into place time-wise is so that they could get a tax levy to them soon enough to extend rolls. And so if it's extended, we need to take a good look at what that does to our A&T folks in terms of, are they going to need additional help to hurry up, so to speak, the tax assessment rolls to get those fun little notices out by November. So just another little thing that occurs.
My questions are answered. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, and stay healthy. All right, so that's it for the first portion of our work session today. Now we'll take a break and then reconvene after lunch at 1 o'clock, and we'll start with our weekly COVID-19 update. And then we have 3 other topics on the agenda after that. So we'll look forward to dialing you up again for those of you on the phone. Thank you.
Thank you. See you at 1.
Just an admin note, we'll have the bridge open again 15 minutes before, so you can call in at any point after 12:45.
Thank you.
Thanks.